Thank you for having me.
This meeting is being recorded.
Okay, I got it. All right, now I can see everyone again. So my name, for those of you that don't know me, is April Vanlonden. I am the Joint Seminaries Registrar at Earlham School of Religion. And I am a 2004 ESR graduate. I am a member of Valley Mills Friends Meeting, which is Western Yearly Meeting. The Valley Mills Friends Meeting sponsored my parents to this country as refugees, and my mother was pregnant with me when they arrived. So that's my history with that. And I think, and I cannot remember how many years in a row I've done this. I've lost count, which lets you know that it's new every time, and I very much enjoy it. And so it is wonderful to see some faces I haven't seen for a year. For those of you that are here for the first time, I have a tendency to try new things with this particular Bible study group at Lake Erie Yearly Meeting. And I have continued to do so again this year. I find the group to be exceptionally forgiving and exceptionally engaged. So last year I engaged with some theology that I was not familiar with, and I thought it went absolutely wonderfully. So I welcome agreements and disagreements and confrontations gently done through the experimentation. So I'm going to walk us through at this point in time what the 3 sessions will be about for David, and this is going back to your question initially. So this first session is going to be talking about the Bible in general and our relationship to the Bible, and trying and our relationship both individually, our relationship both within your particular meetings and within your yearly meeting. And if it's many roots, I start out with one of my first screen is the Bible as root. I'm sorry? Oh, the Bible as root. What we're going to do tomorrow is we are going to, and if you want to familiarize yourself with the stories again, we are going to be talking about the Exodus story. And so we'll be talking about things taken from Exodus, but also Joshua, because Joshua is the arrival. We're going to be taking a look at that particular story within ours and others' tradition from the Africana Bible commentary. And this is the readings of Israel's scripture from Africa and the African diaspora. We are going to take a look at this story from the perspective of the postmodern Bible commentaries and stories that focus on this particular passage and how it interacts with individuals from the indigenous communities. We're going to take a look at this story from the queer Bible commentary and how we interact with this story and individuals from these communities interact. And we'll take a look at the women's Bible commentary and how individuals interact. I'm trying, when I got to looking at what you had on your plates for this particular yearly meeting annual session, what Sally and I tried to do, because I had a wonderful conversation with Sally, is to take a look at what kind of workshops you have going on, what kind of themes, and what can I do to bring those together to give you questions, not answers, but questions to take to the next sessions. So as I experiment with some of these, I want to give you my context and my place. So I am female, I identify as female, born female. I'm cisgender. I am heterosexual. I am biracial. My family, my mother and father were a mixed marriage. We got here prior to the Loving decision in 1968. My parents, neither one were from this country. I have one parent from Asia, Indonesia, one parent from Holland in Europe. I'm the last generation of the Dutch colonialization of Indonesia. And so I will look at the chat questions when we get to the breakout group, so then I don't have to, but yes. And I have white privilege, and as much white privilege as anyone else who is white in this room. So it will sound, I'm stepping outside of my context in some of these commentaries. I am within my context in another set of them. It may sound to you like I am talking out of both sides of my mouth. And that's where I come from. And so if it sounds that way, that's because it is that way. But I also want to talk about the places that I have of privilege, which is how people perceive I look. Because if you put me in a group of people that have the same heritage as I do, I look exactly like them, right? But how people perceive I look with that white privilege and the fact that I am female cisgender. And so that's where my context is coming from. And I think it's important for us to recognize those particular contexts. I also feel that strongly that when it comes to the Bible and different groups, the LGBTQ community, the African-American community, Asian community, women, those kind of things, that it is for those of us in privilege, that come from privilege in those aspects, to argue the Bible stuff with people and let people lay down the need to defend themselves all the time, because it's a re-traumatization. So I'm going to be taking the aspect that I hope I teach something that folks in here who have privilege of whatever type can take out and defend and do what needs to be done. So I'd like to start, and the Bible is so involved in politics right now. And we try to keep those separate, but we can't at this point in time. And so I have, as we enter the silence to begin, I have a reflection that comes from John O'Donohue, who is a former priest, from the book To Bless the Space Between Us. And so as we enter what I was taught was communion after the manner of friends together, I will read his blessing for citizenship. Will friends join me? In these times, when anger is turned into anxiety, and someone has stolen the horizons and the mountains, our small emperors on parade never expect our indifference to disturb their nakedness. They keep their heads down and their eyes gleam with reflection from aluminum economic ground. The media wraps everything in a cellophane of sound, and the ghost surface of the virtual overlays the breathing earth. The industry of distraction makes us forget that we live in a universe. We have become converts to the religion of stress and its deity of progress, that we may have courage to turn aside from it all and come to kneel down before the poor, to discover what we must do, how to turn anxiety back into anger, how to find our way home. Thank you, friends. So let me get my screen up here. So what we're going to be discussing today is the Bible as root. But that is a loaded question. If people say the statement is the Bible of root, would you end that with a period? Would you end that with a question mark? The Bible is root. Would you end, would you end this with the ever famous, the Bible as root? Wait a minute. Would you say all of above? Or would you personally say none of the above? And how does your meeting answer this question? So I'll be referring back to 3 levels. How do you? How does your meeting? And how does Lake Erie, your meeting, end this particular statement? And have you even had the discussion here lately? The Bible is root. We think of roots as beautiful, complementary spirals and sources of sustenance. But you know what? What if they're messy? Many times than not, when roots do actually exist, they look like this. And it is messy. Trying to untangle that is quite an endeavor. So I got this from the Pew Research Center, and you can look that up on the internet. They have these. This comes from the survey that was conducted February 4th through the 15th of 2020 among US adults. Percentage of adults who say that the Bible should have what kind of influence on the laws of the United States? And it is my contention that because 49% say that it should have a great deal, and 50% say, no, not so much, that in order to engage not only in our spiritual lives and our roots in Quakerism, but in our citizenship and political lives with the Bible, irrespective of whether or not or how you answer the previous slides with a period, with a question mark, with indignation. Many of us will read several sources in order to come to a decision. The Bible can be one of them, irrespective of what your beliefs are, because the Bible is being engaged in these kind of things. So as it goes down, for the Christian, of the 49% that say that the Bible should have a great deal of influence on our current laws, 68% are Christian, with Protestants, evangelicals being 76% of that, and white non-evangelicals 89%, 56%. African-American Protestants of this 40 is 76% of them say that. Then you have the Catholic. The Catholics are kind of at the 50-50 mark. Jewish, unaffiliated, atheist, agnostic, nothing in particular. Then you get down to Democrats. 67% of Republicans or leaning Republicans say that the Bible should have a great influence on our laws. 33% of the Democrats or Democratic leading people say that. Now, that's 1/3, so that's not anything to spit at. We have a tendency to think in these binaries, but 33% of Democrats believe that as well, according to this survey. In terms of the age, from 18 to 29, it's 30%. From 30 to 49 of that age group, 49%, 43%. 50 to 64, 61%, and 65 plus 64%. This side tells you about the not much or none group and how that's split down. Not much shouldn't have much to do with the laws, is 19%. Shouldn't have anything at all to do is 31%. Breaking that down again here, and you can again get this particular, right off the web. Now, of the ages in this particular group, from 18 to 29, it is 69% as compared to the 30 over here. That's a big leap. We have from the 30 to 49, 43% of this age group says it should have some to a great deal. This group has 57%, none at all. Of the age group of 50 to 64 who say some to a great deal is 61, but of those who say no, not at all, it's 39. 65 plus is split, 64%, 14 to 21 is 35. So friends, I have a question just to throw out there. Is this what you see or what you perceive in your particular contexts? Or what questions does this bring up for you? And again, I can only see 3 or 4 people. I can also stop sharing. That might make it easier. There we go. So in your particular context, are these statistics jarring? Are they what you perceive? Does this reflect Lake Erie yearly meeting? Were there any shockers in that? Please jump in at any point in time.
I can jump in. What strikes me in, I think the figures probably are fairly accurate, and they probably in a lot of ways reflect what goes on in my meeting, at least. But what strikes me is, and I think it introduced these different Bibles, versions of the Bible earlier. And you separated women and gays and non-whites. But when George Fox and early friends spoke about their faith, it was infused with the Bible, but it was all inclusive. What has happened, I think, from Friends' perspective, is that we have essentially, over time, lost what Fox and early friends were talking about, because the Christianity that they were challenging was the Christianity that is still the mainstream Christianity now, the Christianity of empire or whatever you want to call it. But when when people come into our meetings and they come from outside, and they may have been disappointed by the faith tradition that they were in, they bring Christianity and the Bible as they understood it in their old context. And they don't, and we don't have a different context in which they can understand the Bible and what early friends were talking about, because we have largely lost what early friends were talking about. I'll leave that.
Thank you. David?
Yes, thank you. The question goes to the legal and political. And that's just one of the ways in which people can regard the Bible in their lives or in society. And I think that, and I'm speaking for myself, but many I know have a very high regard for the Judeo-Christian heritage as recorded in the scriptures. And yet, particularly in the free church tradition, have a very strong commitment to the separation of church and state. So it's not at all contradictory to say the Bible is very important, it should guide our lives, but it should not be a source of statute law. It should not be the context in which a majority of the Supreme Court, as they have, take a particular doctrinal view and apply it to constitutional law. So I don't want to give a whole lot of weight to this. I mean, I think I'm not surprised by that breakdown. I was interested to see that Black Americans of evangelical tradition, which is most of them, aren't much different from other evangelicals. There's some differences there. And the former may be socio-political colleagues of ours in social struggle, and the latter are adversarial. So I just don't want to put a whole lot of weight on this when we think of the influence of the Bible in our own individual and religious life.
So I would disagree, but that it may be that we personally don't give a lot of weight to it. But I think in order to engage with others, we have to understand that others do. And that's, and it is something to be reckoned with, so to speak. So at Clements, you had your hand up, but you took it down. Do you still have a question?
I don't have a question so much as Christopher from Cleveland spoke some of what I would have said. I did want to say, I've been a member of Pittsburgh Meeting for decades, and Erie Worship Group at one point, 25 or so years ago, did a workshop with someone from Pendle Hill, and I can't remember her name now. But anyway, we took some Bibles in other languages and tried to compare and contrast the Bibles, and it was astounding how different the words were. And so ever since that, I've been very skeptical about my in-laws who quote chapter and verse to me as the word because of my background in languages and how words can be twisted. And the Italian motto, traduttore traditore, which means the translator is the traitor. And there's only one difference in the vowel in that Italian motto. Your statistics don't surprise me, but what I try to do is look at different versions, and I'm very grateful that you're going to bring us different versions.
So I want to, because I think that these are commentaries, they're not versions of the Bible.
Okay.
So it is the Women's Bible Commentary. It is the Queer Bible Commentary. So I'm going to be working from the NRSV version of the Bible, but it is how people and groups interact with the Bible, not different versions of the Bible, or the Bible as it was developed and how did it become canon, how did it not. We all know that history. So yeah, so I'll be talking about that kind of thing. Susan, I'd take that question before we move on.
I agree with Christopher. I was very leery and have been for years in terms of people talking about the Bible. I was not raised with a particular religion. My father was very prejudiced because he had walked away from the Mormon church and they hounded him. I mean, literally hounded him with missionaries coming to the door, even though we were on a guarded Navy base and we were within the base. My mother was raised Episcopalian. Her father taught English in China and graduated from the University of South, so he was a theologian in some respects. But she was very silent. When I tried to go and visit a Presbyterian church with a girlfriend, she said, no, you wait till you're 21, then you can decide. By the time I was 47, I realized with the great help of a therapist that I was gay. That took a great deal of effort on her part and a leap of faith, very literally on my part. I had read a great deal. I particularly like Sister Joan Chittister, who was a Benedictine nun, but realized that had a very, very liberal and very, very, well, I don't know if it's liberal. a very, very community oriented, a very open kind of way of looking at spirituality. And then a good friend introduced me to Pendle Hill pamphlets, and we had talked over the years. So I did a lot of exploring. My sister practices more of a Buddhist meditation and has been active. But I walked into the Birmingham group pretty much okay that I could be a Quaker because of what I'd read and how I compared it to other things. I'm not super active in the gay community because I was 47. I identified with a heterosexual group. And I walked into the Quaker group when I was about 70. So I'd had a lot of time I'd been out at work. I didn't have a problem with that. Neither did work. But I don't publicize it, sort of. I don't know how, I had a friend that when I said to her, Majors, I'm gay, she looked at me and she said, I've known that. And I sort of looked at her and said, why the hell did you know that? And I didn't. So it is a mixed bag. And
Yes, it is.
And I am so grateful you showed all those books right from the start, because I really debated about attending this.
Oh,
And it is the Birmingham group was very open about the fact. I was open with them that I was gay, but they seemed comfortable with that. There isn't a lot of stress about the Bible, though I'm grateful it comes up once in a while, because I think it does have a tremendous history,
Yeah.
as do other religions. And
right.
so I'm very happy being Quaker.
Thank you. So I'm going to move through before we break into groups. I'm going to share my screen again, and I'm going to present some questions for you to discuss and bring back to the full group. So we have these, but the question is, whose Bible? How much does it mean to anybody? Whose interpretation of the Bible? All those things. What I want to stress and hope that as you break out into your groups in discussion, there has been, at least around Quakers, around where I am, a tendency to say what we're not and what we don't believe. I don't believe this. This is not my definition of God. I want you to focus on what is. What is your interpretation of the Bible, typically, when you interact with it? Because we interact with it almost on a daily basis, whether we know it or not, because it is so culturally ingrained here in the United States. So what is your stance? What is your thought? Not, I don't. You know, the ever famous Quakers don't do this. Quakers don't do that. We don't believe this. We don't believe that. And everybody's like, what do we? So those types of questions, but whose interpretation, whose version of this Bible, all those things. But I want you to come in these groups with your interpretation of the Bible, your version, whether that be an accepted one or not, but your particular take. So what I'd like for you to discuss, and you don't have to answer every one of these questions, and this is a free flowing discussion. Let's see what comes out, but some guides. Was the Bible part of your world as a child? What were you taught about the Bible as a child? How has the Bible been used to hurt you? Is the Bible part of your world today? And what is your relationship with the Bible? Do you consider yourself to be biblically literate? And how comfortable are you in engaging in a discussion with others about the Bible? And that's a question I'd like for you to take a look at beyond the it's very important to me, or I don't consider the Bible to be a part of my life at all. Done. How comfortable are you in engaging in a discussion with others about the Bible? And I'm going to ask Sally I've asked Sally to give us about 20 minutes as we break this group together. And please, if you could, if someone feels so led, to be someone to report back. And Sally, I don't know where you are, but we're ready to be split
Yeah.
into groups.
So what size of groups do you want?
So we have 25 people in here.
We're down to, some had to leave.
Oh,
So we're down to 21 and that includes you.
okay, not including me, split folks into 4 groups. Because if it's friends are okay, I need to step to the restroom. It is morning after the coffee.
Okay, let me see, 2. I'll put April in a group. All right, chill. Looks like we lost what? Well, okay. All right. I think, and you want 20 minutes? So,
Well, why don't we make it, why don't we make it 17?
okay. All right.
Thank you, friends.
I see Alan hasn't.
Alan, you need to click on to be put in a room, I think.
I wonder if he stepped away.
Okay,
So maybe I'll join his group.
okay. I'm going to step to the restroom real quickly, Sally.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
I'll be in group 2.
Okay.
4 of us, 5 of us,
Hi, Sally.
6.
We probably want to stop the recording during this, don't we?
Someone report for us.
So for those of you who are reporting out, can you just pick 1 or 2 sentences from your group that was important takeaways? So group 1, whoever Carolyn was in a group with.
We had a wide-ranging discussion.
So were there any 1 or 2 takeaways?
If you're referring to group 3, yeah, I think the idea of having, we had one member that talked about classes that gave her a really social, historical, and literal viewpoint in reading, studying the Bible in classes, and I thought that was fascinating. That it sort of a more neutral approach.
Okay. Group 1.
I was surprised that mostly those of us who were in group 1 actually were raised as friends. The person who wasn't was raised in a house that read the Bible, but the Bible wasn't the word. And so most of us were raised in a much more open rather than restrictive interpretation of the Bible.
Okay. Group 2.
We talked, a lot of us, several of us, I guess all of us, about the Bible as story, as myth, as poetry, as containing some words of wisdom. One of us said there really is no Bible, no one Bible. We all have our different view and version of the Bible. And we talked about the Bible, that friends often tend to look at the Bible in a spiritual way and not in a grammatical way,
We're going
or
for a walk.
a literal way, perhaps we would say. And that it helps if in our meetings we can help people become comfortable with that spiritual source rather than looking at it as something that's got to be definitive and literally so. I apologize to my group for not getting everything there, but it was a great discussion.
Group 4?
Good job.
Group 4? Wink if you're on mute. Someone's on mute.
I am muted. My husband just came down with the
Oh.
dog. I'm sorry. I forgot. I think we're group 4. We had, I would say not everybody jumped in really fast, which kind of surprised me, but a variety of experiences, including that you can listen to the Bible on audio books going to work. And as someone who's never read the Bible completely, I thought that was pretty interesting. We talked about translations. A couple in our group is bilingual and they read it in both Spanish and English at times. And people had different experiences growing up with or without it. And some people have studied it. One person has studied it in more original languages. So we started scratching the surface, I think, of what people use it for, think about it. Not sure it's a key important, the key book for anybody in the group, frankly, but still important and related to other major religious texts.
Yeah. So I have a last screen to share before we close. Hang on just a second. So this particular piece comes from, I found it at quakertheology.org. It is an article by Anthony Manousos about a Quaker perspective on the Quran and the Bible. I'm not going to particularly focus on the Quran, but this individual advocates for scriptural literacy, irrespective of where the Bible fits in your life, because it is so pervasive in the culture. Scripture, knowledge of the scripture helps us to be more clear and effective when we dialogue with people of the book, which are Christians, Muslims, and Jews. And this piece was written in 0708. So, you know, and such knowledge is essential if you believe, as I do, that interfaith dialogue plays an important role in the post 9/11 peace and reconciliation work. So there's much shared with these three groups, but if we dialogue with people for whom the Bible means more, I mean, so I will be real honest, the Bible does hold maybe a larger place in my life than many Quakers. At the same time, it is an authority, and continuing revelation is the final authority when discerned in a group for me. However, I do acknowledge scripture as an authority. We can have more than one authority. So Scriptural literacy helps us to discern when people are misusing their scriptural tradition, either out of ignorance or because of a political agenda. Americans have been described as Christ-haunted and biblically illiterate, which is sad but true. The recent Barna research, if you go to the Barna research website, and they talk about the state of the Bible today, the bulk of the United States people read the Bible maybe 3 times a year. And yet we hear so much of people quoting out of that Bible that they open 3 times a year. Sad but true, and a source of many problems in today's world. Many Muslims and Jews lack direct knowledge of scripture, either of their own or those of other faiths. And they rely instead on secondhand opinions that sometimes create misunderstanding and mistrust. And when we don't study the Bible, irrespective of what place it is in our life, we too base our things on secondhand opinions, not our own. To counteract ignorance and religious prejudice, we need to study and to share what we know to be accurate and true about scriptures. Early friends knew their scripture intimately and did not hesitate to argue against what they saw were errors. George Fox was knowledgeable enough to quote the Quran, to quote it authoritatively when writing a letter to the Sultan of Turkey calling for humane treatment of sailors captured by the Turks. The Bible is a genuine source of spiritual wisdom. If read with discernment, sensitivity, and intelligence, can help us transform our lives as much as other books. Friends were among the first to recognize divine wisdom, not only in the Bible, but also in the Quran. And he says at the end, and it's true, it's no easy task to become spiritually literate or to read the scriptures in the spirit in which they were written. It takes many years of studies and a willingness to keep an open mind as well as a critical spirit. And so I guess and I do want to, and yes, the scriptures were very important to early friends, as Christopher was talking about. But that critical spirit also allows us to recognize that there's been much debate as to whether George Fox was really very anti-Semitic in terms of his interpretations of scripture. And when we have critical minds, we can, and don't misunderstand me, I read Isaac Pennington this morning to be, in order to spiritually prepare myself for today. So I'm not writing off early friends, but I do have my Bible that is of importance, and stuck in the back is on the yellow thing is the Isaac Pennington thing. That's in there. So we need to be able to have critical minds in terms of reading and being willing to engage. I think all the things that you said about, scripture and different translations and how it can be problematic, but an open mind also enters into this saying, how can it be helpful? How is scripture helpful? It has been the source of help for so many. What can I discover about what other people of wisdom have said? So thank you very much. In terms of preparation for tomorrow, you might want to take a look at the first couple of chapters of Exodus, but also out of chapter 6, read verses 6 through 8. Exodus, the first couple of chapters, and chapter 6, verses 6 through 8. And out of Joshua, the book of Joshua, which is a brutal book. So if I want to do a trauma-informed kind of thing, it's so if you feel so led, Joshua and chapter 11, verses 10 through 12. We'll be talking about the full breadth of the Exodus story, based on these different perspectives. But this will kind of give you some of the gist of what's going on quickly.
Verses 10 through what?
Verses 10 through 12. Friends, thank you very much for your patience.
Thank
And have a wonderful annual sessions. And I will see you once again in the morning with bells on.
Thank you, April.
Thank you.